Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Lou Bayer, and welcome to Reflections. It's my great pleasure today to have the opportunity to speak with Doug Lawrence, who comes from Regina, which is my hometown, too, by coincidence. Doug, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you. And thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, good. It's my pleasure. So, here on Reflections, we like to speak to authors who have books and materials and do what I call the good work, which ties a little bit to civility. So, for those of you new to the podcast, um, uh, we're very interested in, you'll see as we talk to Doug how it all fits together. But for example, he has a book that has the word gift in title, which is always intriguing to me. And we're going to give him an opportunity to speak about that shortly. But we're interested in speaking to authors who are interested in human kindness, in giving back, in sharing some of their gifts and assessing and building the gifts in others. So, Doug, let's start with your expertise, which I understand is in the area of mentoring. So can you tell us a little bit about, what is mentoring? My sense is that many people don't understand the difference between coaching and mentoring, or coaching and mentoring and counseling. Can you help us understand this a little bit?
I certainly can. With so the best way for me is to start with what I call the definition of mentoring. And mentoring is a two-way trusted relationship where both the mentor and the mentee are going to learn and grow on a personal and professional level. So from a mentor's perspective, I know that going into to be able to work with somebody to help them be the best that they can be, um, I know that I too am going to learn and grow. Sometimes I learn about myself, I learn about the other person, I learn about their family, I learn about the place they work. All of those things all form part of that definition of a two-way trusted relationship where both parties learn and grow. And then to sort of talk about the there are differences between coaching and mentoring. And what's one of the things that I typically say to people is that we're going to probably agree to disagree on some things when it comes to the definition of coaching and mentoring. And there are lots of definitions out there. One of the things that I typically suggest to people is that mentoring is that it's basically an ongoing relationship that can last for a long period of time. And to sort of give you some examples is that I have some individuals that I'm working with that I have been their mentor for probably 5 to 6 years. Some of them are in leadership capacities, and some of them it's been just from a personal slash professional development perspective. And so the long-term relationship has served both of us really well. Another point that we can take a look at, the difference between coaching and mentoring, is that mentoring is typically a little bit more informal. Meetings typically take place as and when required. Sometimes it can be simply a text message. I get a lot of mentees who will send me a text message and say, how do I deal with this? Or what about this? Or can we set up a time to do this? Where with a coach, they're generally more structured in nature and the meetings are scheduled on a regular basis. So that just gives you an idea of a couple of them. And then I know you mentioned counseling. So with counseling, I wrote a blog article a few years ago where I went through what I felt based on my reading of the literature, and that was, here's what coaching is, here's what mentoring is, and here's what counseling. And all three kind of blend every so often, but um, what I've found with counseling is that in some respects it's very close at times to the actual practice of mentoring. And we just need to be mindful of that. And the best way for me to look at that is from the aspect of, I view a counselor as a professionally trained individual who is trained in how to deal with grief, or trained in how to do certain modalities, like EMDR is one that eye movement desensitization, and I forget what the last one is, but it's one that focuses on trauma and using eye movement to be able to help relieve the trauma that an individual is dealing with. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea about coaching, mentoring, and counseling without going on for an extended period of time.
Sure, thank you. So that was so interesting to me, I guess, because my focus is workplace. I've always associated this idea of mentoring as in sort of the big brother advisor kind of workplace mentor. But when you suggest that it could be personal or professional, that it can go on for years, and some of the examples you gave, I see that a mentorship could be completely independent of work, right?
Yes, it can. And, sometimes, like, a lot of the areas on the personal growth side, which are what I typically call the selves. So, you're working with somebody who is struggling with self-esteem, self-confidence, self-doubt, self-worth, all of those things. And it's to be able to convince them that they are definitely a better person than what they see themselves as. And as a result of that, there obviously is, when they get to that point, then there's that we'll call it a spin-off, where that behavior, that mindset can filter out to their circle of friends and help them learn and grow just as much as the individual themselves.
Right. So would you say in the process of being mentored, then many people kind of unwittingly maybe learn mentorship strategies, that engagement process, then maybe without even intending to or being deliberate about it, they end up mentoring, as you've suggested, others?
Yeah, I agree with that. And part of that is, we even talk about succession planning and succession development when it comes to the aspect of mentoring. And that's, somebody who is a mentee, so who is being mentored by a mentor, can eventually over time develop, as you have suggested, develop those qualities, those skill sets, those techniques, the mentoring practices. They can develop those, and in turn start to give back to other people who are in the need of being mentored, simply because of what they've learned and grown through the process of effective mentoring.
Okay, sure. And so then the other thing you mentioned, and I guess now I'm understanding a little bit better, because you said the relationship could go on for some amount of time and there's a personal component. So this idea of mutual trust, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I suspect it's critical.
It is the foundational piece to the mentoring relationship, and it's kind of twofold. It's, number one, does the mentor have the capacity or capability to be able to develop a trusting relationship? And then number two is the mentee receptive enough to feel that they can go through the trust building process? And when I talk about the trust building process, I'm talking about, do I feel vulnerable enough that I'm willing to share something very personal about myself? And I'm coming at this from a mentor perspective. Do I feel comfortable enough to be able to share something very close, near and dear to my heart, that I can demonstrate my willingness to be able to, I guess, bare my soul, so to speak, sufficient enough that a person will say, well, he or she is willing to share something very personal. That's somebody I want to build trust with, and I want this relationship to continue on. If that trust isn't there and all you have is just a mentoring relationship, you're not going to see the benefits that you would versus a relationship that was filled with trust. And that can be as simple as sharing something very personal, like a family example. Like I sometimes will talk about the relationship I had or didn't have with my father, and how, alcohol was part of the things we had to deal with in that relationship. And by being able to share that when it's relevant, it helps me be able to demonstrate my vulnerability, but also at the same time, it also helps that individual to be able to say, okay, I get what he or she is trying to do, and I'm comfortable sharing something to a certain point or to whatever level, in order to be able to build that level of trust as well.
Right. And so again, I guess because I'm wanting to make sure I understand clearly the difference between a mentor and a coach. And it sounds to me like the mentorship relationship, to be a good mentor, unlike maybe a good coach, you can help me understand this, but I don't necessarily have to understand the person's work, or I don't have to have experienced what they experience. It's really about knowing people and being empathetic, understanding, certainly there's some training most mentors would have, but it's really about the human condition more so than having to understand the technical aspects of a person's work, for example.
Actually, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's one of the things that when I go into an organization where I'm being brought in to mentor an employee, and they'll start to explain, the management will say, we want to give you some background and stuff on this individual and their job and all that. And I usually say, stop. I don't need that. I prefer to go into this relationship with not knowing, or with knowing as little as possible. And here are the reasons why, because then what that does is that gives me the opportunity to ask a whole series of questions. And in that process of asking that series of questions, I learned something about the employee or about the person. I learned something about the job they do and what it entails and all that, and the interactions that they have with others. I learned something about, about their family background, and because there could be contributors to their behavior that have been ingrained right from younger years in their life. So I learned about all of that. I learned something about the organization. I learned, it may very well have a culture that is not conducive to mentoring, or it may be a culture that, they don't buy into providing employees with coaching, mentoring, counseling, or any of that. And a good example of that is nowadays, a lot of organizations don't have a program in place to deal with the mental health of their employees. And so that falls apart. But so it's all of those things, all when you think about it, is that it gives me, the mentor, the opportunity to do a little bit deeper dig. And when I'm doing that, I'm also building that level of trust, or an increased level of trust.
Excellent. Yeah, that process makes really good sense to me. And I'm sure that it really helps avoid some unconscious or conscious bias too, when you're not hearing the perspective or impression of the others, especially a leadership team who have quite a bit at stake, usually relative to that employee's performance, I would guess. You mentioned some workplace culture that doesn't maybe support or encourage mentorship, which leads me to a next question, which is about culture generally. So I saw in your bio that you've done some work with Branson Entrepreneur Program in the Caribbean, and also in the US, and certainly your book, People Access It in Other Countries. In your years of experience, do you think that the approach to mentorship varies with culture, meaning, demographic culture, not just workplace culture? So do some cultures more naturally engage in mentoring due to belief systems or situational aspects? What's your view on that?
I think that it's because I've gone in and worked with employees where there has been a cultural difference, and part of same sort of thing is, is I get them to make sure that they don't give me more information that I need. And then I have the conversation about, tell me about what it's like in the country that you've come from, as far as work in the workplace and stuff like that. And, it can be as simple as, you know, in country A, it's okay to haul off and slap your coworker across the back with a rather resounding smack. And here in Canada, what I tell employees is, if that's your belief system, that's fine, but make sure that that first slap is a good one, because you probably won't get the second one, because somebody's
Right.
going to, right, they're going to retaliate. So it's understanding some of that stuff. With the work that I did with the Branson group, it was the mentoring process, the practice of mentoring that I typically use when I think of the Branson program. It was more so dealing with generational differences. So me coming at it from, a baby boomer looking at, somebody who is, a Gen X or a Gen Y. It was more so from a generational perspective that I noticed the difference. The culture piece was, I find that I kind of just slide into that whole storyline. And then I just start to ask questions about, tell me a little bit more about, the culture and all that sort of stuff. And I know right now we're working with the Branson program with a lady who has started, is going well with a information technology consulting company. And I'm learning about how, more so from from a political perspective, in that I'm learning how the country is reacting, and therefore the businesses, how they're reacting to COVID and all of that sort of thing. So to come back to the original part of the question, was the culture piece. With me following, kind of staying true to the mentoring processes and the practice of mentoring that I've created, I don't find that that's as challenging as, say, maybe trying to deal with the generational differences.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Huh. And I guess increasingly now we've got, these issues with the identity, and so there's generational aspects, experiential aspects. Culture is such a wide scope topic, but it's very interesting to me, and I would imagine that to be a good mentor, you really have to be empathetic. Like, I'm wondering, you were in law enforcement, and I saw a notation about PTSD, and that you help others with PTSD through mentorship. And so, when we talk about just differences and experiential differences, that various trauma and those kind of things, it's something I think that you have to have a very specific mindset rather, and skill set to address. And you've covered some of that in your book, You're Not Alone. I'm really interested, if we don't have too much time, but if you can tell us a little bit about that book and that mentorship in PTSD.
I certainly can. So You're Not Alone it's my second book, and it is focused on the aspect of mentoring being part of the support structure for mental health. So post-traumatic stress, anxiety, stress, depression, operational stress injuries, all of those things all fit into that basket. And the book came as a result of some people, as did my first one, where people came to me and said, you need to write a book on this. And there's a place for mentoring within the mental health space or mental health arena. And what was interesting was, when I started to read the literature and stuff on the topic of mentoring and mental health, I discovered that I too had post-traumatic stress, and that I too had struggled with trying to deal with it because the organization did not have a proper program in place to provide that support. And so I had to, my wife and two children ended up becoming that support structure. And like I tell the story that my wife, you know, I turned to alcohol was going to be my crutch, and a lot of things like that that were crutches that I ended up, my wife knew that inside that shell of a body was her real husband, Doug, and that, you know, she would do whatever she could to help Doug come out and be the good person that he was, because I most definitely was not a very good person. And that's what the book starts to address. I tell my story, and I've interviewed a few other people that have shared their story, which, you know, we don't want to diminish their story because their story is important. But I went through some pretty severe trauma of different situations that, because of where I was posted and having to deal with a number of things without the benefit of, you know, a community that may not have had medical staff that was there to be able to help when you're dealing with something that, you know, like a sudden death or suicide or stuff like that. So you are not alone kind of takes you into that window of what that's all about and lets you make a decision is, do you really want to be alone? And the title comes from the aspect of, I typically refer to being in the closet, and that it's okay to ask for help and come out of the closet, and that we need to have people that are willing to wait on the other side of the closet door to be there when that hand is extended, to be able to grab the hand and say, I got you. Let's begin your healing journey.
Sure. Wow. Yeah. So again, I'm understanding to a greater extent, you know, how this has been your life's work, and the depth of some of those personal pieces tied to mentorship. You know, I really wasn't understanding in the beginning how it could be so personal, but I'm getting it now. So this mentorship is the way you address it and administer it, really is sort of a comprehensive personal development solution, right? It's not just conversations. It's a more comprehensive approach, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So I'm also interested now, as we talked about at the very beginning of the session, about you call mentorship a gift, and it seems to me that's in the title of one of your books too. So I feel like this act of doing for others, especially in the comprehensive way that you're doing, is in fact an act of civility. And, you know, reflecting on that, can you describe for us a little bit how you feel that mentorship is a gift, and tell us a bit more about that book if you can.
So yeah, the book is The Gift of Mentoring is the title of the book, and it basically is mentoring 101, for lack of a better choice of words. And I do really truly believe that mentoring is a gift, and to receive mentoring is a gift as well. And I know for myself that, you know, sometimes, well, a good example of when I had given the gift of mentoring to one of my colleagues, and actually, she's one of the individuals that I have a long-term relationship with, mentoring relationship with. And God bless her, but she and her husband invited me to their wedding as a result of the relationship that we had. And at the wedding, at the reception, both her and her husband came up to me, and I thanked them profusely for the invitation. And they said, we could not imagine having our wedding without you being here, because you've done so much for us with your mentoring, your friendship, and all of that, that this is just a small token for a small token from us to be able to say to you, thank you for all that you've done. And I went, all the time, all the hours that I've spent, just what she just said was gratification, was thanks enough for everything that I had done. And so I know that when you share that gift, when you give back and you share that gift with others, that sometimes there isn't that instant gratification, but it's there, and we just have to wait, and we just have to be patient for it.
Wow, that's really meaningful. Um, so I suspect too this kind of work is something you can do, for a very long time, unlike some other callings or work, people stop work at age 55 or whatever that retirement age is. But this is something that you probably actually become a better mentor with age and wisdom. Do you think?
I do, and it's wisdom from the aspect of your lived experience. So the longer that, I hang in here and continue to do what I'm doing, the more lived experience I'm going to get. And with that comes the ability to be able to share that gift of that lived experience with so many other people that, I may not have been able to reach out and touch. Simply because you didn't have the time, where now that's my long-term vision, is to be able to continue to do this for as long as I possibly can, and to continue with the gift of mentoring and giving back to those individuals that are standing there with their hand out and saying, I need your help.
Mhm. Wow, excellent. Good. So it's really been a pleasure, Doug. Thank you so much. I've learned so much in our short time together, and I'm looking forward to reading at least the Mentorship 101. I think it would really serve me well. But while we have just a few minutes left here, is there anything else you want to add? And would you mind sharing with our listeners where they can find you or where they can find your books?
Yeah, I certainly can. So both books, well, the Gift of Mentoring is available on the Amazon site, and it's available for purchase today. The You Are Not Alone is due to be released on the 17th of January. And however, you can pre-order the book on Amazon, and there's a number of other, I think Barnes and Noble and a number of other sites as well. You can pre-order the ebook, and it'll be released on the 17th of January of next year, so 2022. So if people are interested and want to learn more, or want to learn more about mentoring, they can feel free to, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just search for my profile, Doug Lawrence, and take a look, and you can connect with me through LinkedIn if you wish. And if you would prefer, you can also reach out to me through my email, which is doug.lawrence. So doug.lawrence at talentc. So the word talent with the letter C on the end, .ca. And I'd be more than delighted to get back to you as quickly as I possibly can. And yeah, so that would be the primary way to get a hold of me.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Doug. I look forward to the release of the new book. Congratulations on that. And thank you again for your time and sharing your wisdom and expertise with us today.
Thank you very much for having me, and I've really enjoyed our time together.
Thank you, Doug. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.